Malachi Brooks stood with the sun glaring down on his parched homestead, the scent of sun-bleached wood and dry earth swirling in the heat. He tightened his grip on the broken fence post, hands calloused from years of solitary labor, when the silence shattered like glass. 4 bodies dropped at his gate, collapsing in the dust, as if the desert had spat them out. He dropped the post, a knot of dread twisting in his stomach. Heart pounding, he stepped closer, squinting against the fierce light. The girls lay huddled together, their clothes tattered and smudged with dirt. The smallest, not more than 10, curled tightly, like a frightened rabbit. "Hey!" Malachi called, voice rough as gravel. "You all right?" The oldest girl lifted her head, dark eyes locking onto his with a mix of fear and fierce determination. "Help us," she whispered, barely above the sound of the wind stirring the dust around them. He hesitated, the weight of years spent avoiding the world's troubles pressing heavily on him. He had chosen this isolation deliberately, leaving behind the chaos that had almost consumed him. Yet, those eyes, there was a fight in them, a flicker of something he hadn't seen in a decade. "I can't," he said, retreating a step. "You don't understand." "Please," she gasped, forcing herself upright. "They're coming. You're safe here. But we—" A whimper from the youngest pierced through his resolve like an arrow. It was a sound so fragile, so broken, it made his heart clench. He felt the pulse of helplessness in the air, thick as the dust cloud rising on the horizon behind them. "What's your name?" Malachi asked, stepping a little closer, drawn in despite himself. "Ayana," she replied, her voice steadying. "And these are my sisters, Ka, Naeli, and Senna." She gestured to them with a flicker of pride before her strength waned, and she slumped back against the wooden gate. He glanced to the horizon, where a dust cloud swirled ominously, moving closer. This wasn't just exhaustion, it was fear that drove the girls to him. "Are they following you?" he asked, his breath catching. Ayana nodded, her gaze fierce. "We were running. They're hunters. You need to help us." His instincts screamed for him to turn back, to retreat to the safety of his cabin, but that whimper cut through the last of his defenses. He stepped forward, unlatched the gate with trembling hands, and pushed it open. As the iron hinges groaned, a mix of relief and despair washed over Ayana's face. "Thank you," she breathed, though the gratitude felt more like a plea. Malachi knelt beside her, the smell of sweat and fear mingling in the stifling air. He could see Ka's fevered brow, Naeli's vacant eyes, and the small form of Senna trembling beside Ayana. "Get inside," he urged, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I'll get you water." Ayana stiffened, clutching her sister's shoulder, and looked back at him. "You don't know what he wants." "He knows you live here." Malachi's heart sank. "Who?" "Victor Kane," she spat, the name a bitter curse. "He'll use us to get to you." The sound of hoofbeats reached his ears, echoing across the open land, like a death knell. His mind raced back to the past, a life filled with chaos and bloodshed, and now Kane was somehow back in the picture. The memory of fire and loss flooded his senses, each one sharper than the last. "Why now?" he asked, a tremor in his voice. "After all these years?" "He's been looking for us," Ayana insisted, her grip tightening on her sister's. "For you?" Panic gripped him. "You need to hide," he barked, rising to his feet. "Get back in the shadows of the cabin." "No!" she snapped, her strength returning with the urgency of desperation. "We can't let him take you too. If he finds you—" The impending threat loomed outside, each hoofbeat drawing closer, and he felt his carefully built walls begin to crumble. Malachi glanced back at the gathering dust cloud, then at the girls, now brimming with a resolve he once knew well. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, surrendering to the inevitability of their situation. "We have to prepare. We can't let him win," Ayanna said, her eyes blazing with defiance. Malachi nodded, though uncertainty coiled in his gut. The past had a way of catching up to you, turning your sanctuary into a trap. "Gather what you can," he said, his voice steadying as he took command of the moment. "And find something to defend yourselves. We're going to need each other, and I'll fight," Ayanna said, her gaze unwavering. "I won't let him take any of us." He took a deep breath, the dust settling on his shoulders like an old weight he'd been trying to shake off for years. "Then let's make sure we don't go down without a fight." As the hoofbeats grew louder, Malachi felt the mantle of a protector settle on his shoulders once again. The quiet life he'd carved out for himself was unraveling, but perhaps that was what it took to finally confront the ghosts of his past. "Get ready," he said, heart pounding in time with the sound of approaching riders. In that moment, the air crackled with tension, a charged stillness that wrapped around them like a noose. He scanned the yard, half hidden by the overgrown weeds, and spotted an old plowshare leaning against the cabin's wall, rusted but sturdy. It was a relic of a simpler time, yet it might serve their purpose well enough. "Car," he called, his voice steady as he motioned toward the plowshare. "Grab that and bring it over." The girl's eyes widened with confusion, but she scrambled to obey, her thin arms straining to lift the heavy metal. Senna clutched at Ayanna's skirts, peering out from behind her sister, an unspoken fear radiating from her small form. Malachi turned back to the dust cloud, almost upon them now, and the shadows of riders began to take shape, dark silhouettes against the fading light. "Do you have any weapons?" he asked urgently, not taking his eyes off the approaching threat. "Just stones and a few knives," Ayanna said, her tone unyielding despite the tremor in her hands, as she turned to gather supplies from their meager belongings strewn about the cabin's entryway. "Make every shot count," he instructed, scanning the landscape for options. It wasn't just the girls he had to protect. It was the last flicker of hope he'd buried deep within himself, a hope that there might still be a way to vanquish the ghosts that haunted him. A sudden gust of wind rustled the dry grass, carrying with it the scent of impending rain, though he knew it was unlikely to arrive before the riders. "Listen to me," Malachi said, lowering his voice as the pounding of hooves grew nearer. "Stay close together. Whatever happens, we stick together. Got it?" The sisters nodded, eyes glistening with resolve, but tinged with fear. Car finally managed to drop the plowshare at Malachi's feet with a loud thud, and he picked it up, feeling its weight settle into his hands, like an old friend. With the weight of the past and the unknown future pressing down on him, he stepped in front of the girls, positioning himself protectively as the riders emerged from the dust, their faces obscured by shadow and intent. Each face held a story, an echo of past grievances that Malachi had long since tried to forget. "Victor Kane!" he shouted, his voice carrying over the thundering hooves. You want me? Come get me! Laughter rang out like shattering glass, slicing through the tension as the group came to a halt. Cain emerged from behind his men, his grin a serpentine mockery of welcome. Ah, Malachi, so good to see you again. I've been wondering how long it would take before you'd show your face. And look at this. He gestured dramatically to the girls. You've gathered quite the little entourage. Malachi could feel Ayana's tension spike beside him, her breath hitching at the sight of her former captor. Stay back, he warned, but the authority in his voice faltered under Cain's gaze. Let's make a trade, shall we? Cain continued, circling them like a predator sizing up its prey. You give me what I want, and I'll let them go unharmed. The words hung in the air, thick with menace. Malachi's heart raced, the old scars of fear reopening, but the fire in Ayana's eyes reminded him why he had pushed against the tides of his past. You don't scare me, Cain, he said, the conviction rising in his chest. I'm not the man you once knew. Oh, but I think you are, Cain replied, his voice smooth and oily, every word a calculated taunt. And deep down, you know it too. Let's see how far that bravado holds when the stakes are real. With a sharp intake of breath, Malachi tightened his grip on the plowshare, feeling the pulse of the moment quicken. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for the girls, for their future, for a life free of the chains that bound them to the past. In the heart of the encroaching storm, with the dust swirling around them like a shroud, Malachi braced himself, ready to forge a new thread in the tapestry of their intertwined fates. The air crackled with tension, as if the very heavens were holding their breath. Malachi could hear the faint patter of rain beginning to fall, mingling with the rhythm of thundering hooves, a cruel reminder of nature's indifference to human struggle. Shadows loomed larger in the dimming light, revealing more faces twisted with greed and malice, their leather jackets glinting ominously. Trade, Malachi spat, the word tasting bitter on his tongue. What could you possibly want from me that wouldn't just lead you back to your old ways? You've made your choice, Cain. Now, live with it. Ah, but choices are a funny thing, aren't they? Cain replied, his tone deceptively light as he stopped just a few paces away. The flicker of his eyes betrayed a depth of calculation, and in that moment, Malachi noticed a glint of metal tucked into the waistband of Cain's belt, a dagger, no doubt sharp and eager for blood. The sight sent a chill through him, but he pushed it down. Consider this your last chance, Cain continued, his smile fading to a predatory glare. You're outnumbered, Malachi. Hand over the girls, and I might show you mercy. Malachi's heart thundered in his chest, drowning out the sound of the rain as it began to pour, each drop a reminder of the urgency pressing against him. The ground, still parched, drank in the moisture hungrily, the scent of damp earth filling the air and mingling with the metallic tang of fear. Senna, he whispered, without breaking his stare from Cain. Stay behind Ayana. Don't move unless I tell you. The little girl nodded, though her grip on her sister tightened almost painfully. Malachi could see the tremor in Ayana's hands as she clenched the stones they had gathered, her knuckles white against the backdrop of the darkening sky. There was fire in her eyes, the same fire that had burned in their mother, unyielding even in the face of despair. That's right, little soldier, Cain mocked, noticing Ayana's stance. Make yourself useful. though I doubt even your bravery can save you from what's coming." Malachi took a step forward, feeling the weight of the moment shift. "You don't know the first thing about bravery, Cain. It's not about facing death. It's about standing up for what you love." With that, a flash of lightning illuminated the scene, momentarily revealing the grim expressions of the riders surrounding them. The thunder that followed rolled through the valley like a warning bell, but he could sense the crack in the facade, the hesitation creeping into Cain's confidence. "Enough of this," Cain hissed, his patience thinning. "Let's end this game." In that instant, the world around them fell silent, the rain slowing to a soft patter, as if even nature was waiting with bated breath. Malachi tightened his grip on the plowshare, the metal cool against his palm, grounding him in this moment between past and future. With one swift motion, he swung the plowshare in a wide arc, its edge catching the dim light. "Then, come and take what you think you can have." And with that challenge, the storm broke, rain cascading down in torrents as the riders surged forward, and Malachi prepared to fight, not just for his own redemption, but for the very essence of the lives he had vowed to protect. The rain fell like a curtain, obscuring the world beyond their immediate confrontation. Each droplet struck the earth with a dull thud, weaving a tapestry of mud and fear beneath their feet. The air thickened with anticipation, charged with the unspoken echoes of old grievances and unresolved battles. Malachi could feel the slickness of the ground beneath him, a reminder that even the strongest would falter when the earth turned treacherous. A low growl erupted from one of Cain's men, a burly figure with a scar snaking down his cheek. "You're just a farmer playing hero, Malachi. You're out of your league." The laughter that followed was cruel, punctuated by the crack of thunder overhead, as if nature herself mocked their bravado. Malachi's resolve hardened. "A farmer knows the land better than a drifter knows his blade," he shot back, his voice steady against the howling wind. As the first of Cain's men charged, a flash of movement caught Malachi's eye. A flickering lantern suspended from a nearby tree branch, its flame flickering defiantly against the storm. It reminded him of the warmth of home, of the hearth around which they had gathered many nights. That thought ignited a fire in his belly, igniting a primal instinct to protect what was his. The burly man lunged, fists raised, but Malachi sidestepped, slashing the plowshare low, catching the man off guard. The blade sang through the air, and as it bit into flesh, the man howled, collapsing in a heap, clutching his leg. The scent of blood mingled with the fresh rain, a bitter perfume that sharpened Malachi's focus. "Get him!" Cain roared, and the remaining riders surged forward, a pack of wolves drawn to the scent of blood. In the chaos, Malachi's eyes flicked to Senna and Ayana, who stood resolute behind a gnarled oak, the tree's twisted roots anchoring them in place, a fortress against the storm. He saw the determination etched on their faces, a mirror of the legacy they had inherited. It was more than just his fight now. It was theirs. With swift movements, he pivoted, fending off another attacker, his muscles screaming with the effort. Each strike was fueled by a memory, the sound of laughter, the taste of home-cooked meals, the warmth of their mother's embrace. These were the threads that tied him to life, that made him the man he was. "Don't let them take our thread!" he shouted over the cacophony, hoping to instill courage in the girls. "We weave our own story." The rain poured heavier, drenching the earth and their enemies alike, transforming the ground into a slick battlefield. As Malachi fought, he felt the pull of fate tangling the strands of their lives. They were not just fighting for survival, they were asserting their right to shape the future. The next rider came at him, a wiry figure with wild eyes, swinging a rusted machete. Malachi ducked, feeling the whoosh of the blade pass just above his head. He countered with a sweeping kick, knocking the man off balance, and as he stumbled, Malachi seized the opportunity to swing his plowshare again, this time finding purchase against flesh and bone. The cold rain blurred his vision, but he could see clearly now. The flicker of defiance in his sister's eyes reflected back at him. The power of their bond surged within him, and he tightened his grip, grounding himself as another wave of attackers closed in. "Keep fighting," he urged, locking eyes with Ayana, who lifted her stones high, ready to defend what they held dear. The storm raged on, but amidst the chaos, Malachi's heart beat steady, a drum heralding the dawn of a new story yet to be woven. With each clash of metal and bone, the world around them warped into a blur of rain and fury. But through the chaos, the rhythm of their fight felt like a dance, a fierce choreography of survival and rebellion. Malachi could see Cain's men faltering, doubt creeping in as their numbers dwindled against the stubbornness of 3 steadfast souls. He dodged a wild swing, adrenaline thrumming through his veins, and with a quick spin, he disarmed his attacker, sending the machete skittering across the mud. The sound of metal against wet earth echoed, a reminder of the stakes rising higher with every passing moment. "Look out!" Senna shouted, her voice slicing through the storm. Malachi turned just in time to see a figure materialize from the shadows of the trees, a lanky man with a knife gleaming in his hand, eyes darting like a cornered animal. He lunged, but before the blade could find its mark, Ayana hurled one of her stones with a precision that belied her stature. It struck true, catching the man square in the temple. He crumpled to the ground, a marionette severed from its strings. The sisters had formed an unbreakable triangle, each protecting the other with fierce loyalty, a testament to their bond. "Together!" Malachi yelled, feeling the weight of their shared purpose. The storm intensified, thrumming like a war drum, each drop a reminder of the lives they were defending. They needed to push through, to hold the line against the tide that sought to sweep them away. Another man charged, brandishing a club, and Malachi stepped forward, planting his feet firmly on the slick ground. The desperate fight for survival had morphed into something greater, a stand against oppression that rose like the very earth beneath their feet. He sidestepped again, and with a sharp kick he sent the attacker sprawling, the club flying from his grip and splashing into the mud. Amidst the frenzy, a flicker of movement drew Malachi's gaze. A small black cat slinking through the underbrush, its fur glistening with rain. It paused, watching the fight unfold, eyes wide and unblinking. In that moment, Malachi felt a strange kinship with the creature, both caught in a tempest, both fighting for their place in the world. The sight bolstered his resolve. If the smallest among them could endure, so could he. With renewed energy surging through him, Malachi launched himself into the fray once more, every swing of his plowshare telling the tale of their ancestors, of a lineage that had endured far worse than this storm. "We are the thread," he cried, voice booming above the din of combat. "Unbreakable, entwined in this fight." The moment hung heavy in the air, charged with the weight of their history, and for a heartbeat, the world around them faded as they moved as one. 3 against many, forging their narrative amidst the storm's fury. The rain fell in sheets, a relentless curtain that twisted around them like a serpent, wrapping their bodies in cold, slick mud. Malachi could feel the earth shift beneath his feet with each violent clash, the soil beneath him soaking up the blood and sweat of their struggle. Yet, even as they fought against the tide of darkness, a flicker of warmth ignited in his chest, a fierce flame born from unity. Ayana's sharp breath drew his attention, and he caught sight of her chin lifted defiantly, a storm of determination swirling in her gaze. "To the trees!" she shouted, motioning toward the dense thicket that bordered their small clearing. "Use the cover!" It was a plan born of desperation, but one Malachi embraced. They needed to slip from the immediate danger, to regroup and regain the upper hand. He felt the shift in their energy, a pulsing current binding them together as they pressed toward the twisted trunks that seemed to cradle them with ancient wisdom. Each footfall echoed their resolve, 3 warriors entwined, merging into one entity carved from the very heart of the land. As they darted into the shadows of the trees, Malachi glanced back to see